For me, Baldur's Gate 3 felt like it came out of nowhere in terms of setting a new bar for gaming as a whole. It really threw a wrench in the gaming industry, and for those older gamers, it felt like a callback to days when developers and publishers actually pushed the envelope when it came to making games. It also got a lot of gamers thinking about the state of AAA, where a small company like Larian Studios could achieve with the budget they had, compared to the big boys such as EA, Activision Blizzard, and say Ubisoft, which haven't really been able to achieve much in the last 10 years.
Oh brother, this guy stinks!
But viewer, this isn't about the state of the AAA game industry. No, it's about the music of Baldur's Gate 3 and how this soundtrack should be celebrated. The themes of Baldur's Gate 3 really do set the tone of the soundtrack, and from the beginning of the game you're essentially given a death sentence. Themes of desperation and redemption, dark and unknown forces, the cost of power, and the need to find a cure really sets the stage for the plot of this story. However, the game really does center around agency and choice. Who will you befriend and trust? How will you influence the outcome to decisions that you and your party have made? Stepping back for a second, I just want to explain a few things. Music is usually used in media for three main reasons: world building, storytelling, and character development. There are a number of soundtracks out there that only really use one or two of these elements, and there's nothing wrong with that. Certain types of media may only need music for, say, storytelling or world building. However, what I love about this soundtrack is that a number of the tracks are used for multiple reasons. It's not uncommon to hear certain tracks played in the game used for, say, character development and storytelling, or maybe all three.
Jam something inside the mechanism here. Oh, here we go. Oh, what?
However, a sign of a great soundtrack is when the music itself can be listened to independently from the media in which it was written for. But the main reason why this soundtrack is so great is that the music is written with a lot of emotion and intent. But what do I mean by this? This is a quote from Borislav, the composer and musical director for Baldur's Gate 3. I don't want to be involved, I want to be committed, as this is the only way to make people feel and experience the emotions. I mean, this really does sum up the soundtrack for me personally. But to understand the music of Baldur's Gate 3 on a deeper level, we first need to know a little bit about Borislav and where he draws inspiration for this soundtrack. Borislav is not your traditional music composer. He didn't study music at a college or have any formal training at a music conservatory. Borislav used to sing and play guitar in a band. What's interesting though is he was actually an IT specialist until 2001 when he decided to become a composer for music and games and media, citing part of this reason was because he loved video games. Some of his previous works involves Crisis 2 and 3, Rise, Son of Rome, and Divinity Original Sin 2. In interviews, he said his influences include composers such as Harry Gregson Williams, the composer for the Metal Gear series, John Powell, whose recent works involves How to Train Your Dragon, and Hans Zimmer. Interesting to note, he actually worked with Hans on the soundtrack for Crisis 2. The more videos I do about soundtracks and video game soundtracks in particular, the more I realize just how small this industry actually is regarding the composers. Borislav has also said in interviews that folk music from around the world has influenced his work, stating a hobby of his is to collect stringed instruments from around the globe, which he uses regularly in soundtracks. He's also stated that he specializes in ethnic and medieval music. A lot of his influences are quite evident in the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3. However, what stands out to me is the relationship between the soundtracks of Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate. Both games were made by Larian Studio, one after each other, and both would be considered a CRPG. What's interesting though is certain types of instrumentation, timbre, musical form, and motifs referenced from Divinity Original Sin 2 can kind of be heard in the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3. Here, check this out. While Baldur's Gate's soundtrack is not a one-to-one copy of the themes from Divinity, I can personally hear elements of Divinity in the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3 though. You see, this doesn't really surprise me. Divinity Original Sin 2 was a game released just before Baldur's Gate 3, and Larian Studio has discussed in the past a lot of what the systems that were used in Baldur's Gate 3 were built on systems of Divinity Original Sin 2, so why not the music? Both games being set in Dungeons and Dragons like universes, with Baldur's Gate and the Sword Coast actually being set in the universe of D&D. I'm not actually sure how canon the plot for Baldur's Gate 3 is in the universe of D&D. I would have no clue. However, the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3 feels like a development of Divinity Original Sin 2 soundtrack, but maybe with darker themes associated with it. To be honest though, I haven't played Divinity Original Sin 2, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. Another influence of Borislav's background is the use of European folk music and cinematic orchestral music used in the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3. This is evident with the choice of instrumentation and the types of ensembles used in the soundtrack itself, such as different types of string guitars and percussive drums from Eastern Europe and potential parts of the Middle East. However, I think the biggest influence on Borislav's background for the soundtrack of Baldur's Gate 3 is his time spent playing and singing in a band. And why, you may ask? With some of the tracks he's written for, he's explained that he's gained inspiration by just kind of picking up his guitar, or he's been in a location where a melody or a lyric has come to him. He's explained the track Down by the River was inspired by the canals in the city of Ghent. The original lyrics and melody came to him as he was walking the channels, and he was quick to record the lyrics to his phone. He said after presenting the song to Larian Studios, he realised he struck a chord with the team after he noticed multiple team members singing and humming the tune. However, he knew Down by the River was a theme that was usable because it was scalable, meaning that he was able to strip the melody back just to the naked voice and also scale it up to a full orchestra, and this is evident throughout the soundtrack for Baldur's Gate 3. Or another example, The Weeping Dawn. A colleague from Larian had contacted him to discuss arranging and writing a song for Alfrea. He said that the colleague gave him the impression it was a really important character to the game, which if you've played the game, it's not really an important character to the plot of the story. Borislav said he wrote and recorded the first version of the song with voice and guitar, as he had an orchestral recording session coming up in a couple days, thinking that the song needed to be ready for that session, only to find out that the character was a side quest. Borislav's approach to writing both Down by the River and The Weeping Dawn feels like the same approach as a singer-songwriter. He's explained he tends to sing every song he composes first before committing anything to paper, or maybe guitar in this case. Which is why I think some of these tracks hold up as independent forms of music and art from the actual game itself. Which leads me to want to discuss a little bit more about his philosophy and approach to writing music. As he puts it, when writing a theme for a song, the main driving force is emotion. He said he doesn't pay too much attention to the technology and technical aspects involved, or even the instrumentation or theory behind writing music. In addition, he said to be good at making games, you need to enjoy the process of creation, because you cannot fool people. Going on to explain that, as a gamer himself, he can tell when devs don't enjoy making a game. Borislav has also gone on to explain the importance of collaboration with the writing process for the soundtrack of Baldur's Gate 3, explaining how he's gotten connected and excited about the music by working with colleagues at Larian Studios and discussing the direction of where the narrative of the game was heading, the story development of key certain characters, and the gameplay. He's also said that team spirit and inspiration from leadership fostered that excitement as well. It should be pointed out that Borislav is not just the composer for Baldur's Gate 3, he's also the musical director. I think that's something important regarding the relationship with him and Larian, and as music director, he's able to dictate how the music is implemented into the game. While other composers on other games may not have that same relationship with the studio, and may not have the same collaboration between members of that studio as well. I wanted to take some time also to discuss some of my favourite tracks from Baldur's Gate 3 that haven't necessarily been discussed in this video so far. Starting with Raphael's final act, I love this song. When I listen to this track, I feel like I'm watching musical theatre, and it has a bit of a vibe of Phantom of the Opera as well with the organ. If you know anything about the character of Raphael, he's literally the devil and he has a flair for the theatrical. We're all just puppets in a greater game he's playing, and he's the main actor of a grand play. Look, I won't say anything more, I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't finished the game, but for people who have finished Baldur's Gate 3, you get what I'm saying. Another theme I want to discuss was the song I Want to Live, and this track is quite morbid and has a lot of tones of desperation, especially if you listen to the track with lyrics. However, what's interesting about this song is Borislav has said that the song is based around the idea of a player's theme. He said he wanted a theme that the player could attach its own adventure to and could give support and comfort. Which makes sense to me, as the track is played every time you return to camp and long rest. And you know, usually a lot of important character development happens, and usually certain spicy relationship stuff happens as well. So, sure, let's make this song the player's theme. Look, there are a number of songs from the soundtrack that really deserve their own video, which a number of musician YouTubers have done reactions for. But this video is really to give an overview of the soundtrack and to give a bit more information of the background and influences of the composer Borislav. Maybe in the future I will do some reactions or a breakdown of these songs, but let me know in the comments if this is something you'd be interested in, and let me know what other video game soundtracks you might be interested in me doing next. If you like this type of content, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It really helps the channel grow. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Cheers.